You know, when you're reading ancient texts, some things can feel just weird, right? But what's fascinating is that those strange ideas often hide a much deeper meaning. And today we're going to uncover one of the biggest puzzles, the biblical disease of leprosy.
All right, so let's dive right in. We're going to start with the riddle of biblical leprosy. And the reason it's a riddle is because, as you'll see, the way this disease is described, well, it doesn't act like any medical condition we know. It's more like a strange, almost supernatural puzzle.
And this is where it gets really weird. I mean, think about it. How can a biological disease, a skin condition, infect a person, but then also show up on their clothes, or even on the stones of their house? That just doesn't make sense. Clearly, something else is going on. Okay, and if you thought that was strange, get this. The rules in the book of Leviticus just flip medical logic completely on its head. A small little spot of the stuff makes a person unclean. But if that same disease spreads and covers their entire body, turning them completely white, suddenly they're declared clean. What? I mean, that makes absolutely zero sense medically, right? And that is our first huge clue, that we're not talking about a physical disease here.
So, if it's not a skin disease, then what in the world is it? Well, this is where we get to the real diagnosis. It seems the Bible is using leprosy as a really powerful physical metaphor for something spiritual.
Yeah, so that word we translate as leprosy is really describing a kind of spiritual numbness. It's this state where our own thoughts, our own self-generated knowledge, what the Bible calls our living flesh, have become kind of deadened, totally disconnected from God's truth. So think of it like this. You're fully alive to your own ideas, but you're completely numb to the divine.
Now, to really get this, we've got to look at this key contrast the Bible sets up between two huge figures, the first Adam and the second Adam. You can see it right here. The first Adam is called a living soul. This is basically humanity in its natural state, driven by its own knowledge. But then you have the second Adam who represents Christ, and he's called a life-giving spirit, a totally different thing. He's an active force that actually imparts spiritual life. He doesn't just possess it.
So here's the bottom line, the crucial point. This living flesh we're talking about, our own thoughts, our own plans, the stuff we do totally independent from God, that is the actual condition being diagnosed here. That's the real source of the impurity.
Okay, but where did this spiritual condition even come from? To get to the root of it, we have to go way, way back, all the way to the origin story in the Garden of Eden.
So here's God's original command. It's super clear, totally direct, absolutely no wiggle room. The consequence for disobedience is certain. You will certainly die. There's no ambiguity, no maybe, no we'll see.
But now, watch what happens when Eve repeats the command. She makes these two really subtle but absolutely critical changes. First, she adds a rule God never even gave, or touch it. And second, she totally softens the consequence. It goes from a certainty, you will certainly die, to just a possibility, lest you die, or maybe you'll die. And that tiny little crack of doubt, that small alteration, that's exactly what the serpent jumps on. Because she's already changed the command herself, it's just a small step for the serpent to come in and contradict it completely. Her little distortion is what made the big lie believable.
And this, right here, brilliantly illustrates the very first symptom of this spiritual disease. It all starts the moment we add our own reasoning, our own rules and interpretations onto the simple, direct Word of God. That's the moment the infection takes root.
So okay, if that's the disease, then what's the cure? Well, for that, we're going to turn to this fascinating story in the Old Testament. It's about a really powerful general named Naaman, who actually had physical leprosy.
So the prophet Elisha gives him this, well, it's a bizarre prescription. Go dip yourself in the muddy Jordan River 7 times. And at first, Naaman is just insulted. His human logic totally kicks in. He's like, are you kidding me? The rivers back home are way cleaner and better than this. But, and this is the turning point, it's only when he finally surrenders his pride, gives up on his own better idea, and just obeys the weird command that he's healed.
And the lesson here is just so profound. The cure for this spiritual numbness, it isn't about finding a better strategy or coming up with a smarter plan. It's about completely abandoning our own logic and just simply trusting the divine word, no matter how strange or illogical it seems to us.
Okay, so let's bring this all full circle. Remember that word Eve added, the one that came from her own reasoning? Touch? Well, get ready, because the Bible is about to redeem that very same concept.
The specific Hebrew verb here is nuga,
And understanding this original word is so key because it doesn't just mean a quick physical touch. It implies making meaningful contact. So Eve introduced this whole idea of contact as something to be forbidden, a source of impurity.
And check out this incredible contrast. The exact same act, to touch, to make contact, has two completely opposite results. On one side, when that contact is driven by human reasoning, like Eve's made-up rule not to touch the tree, it leads to impurity. But then, on the other side, when someone makes contact with something divinely holy, like the altar in the temple, that very same act of touching brings purification. Isn't that amazing?
And all of this is building to the ultimate conclusion. The cure for our spiritual numbness is to make contact, to touch the ultimate source of holiness, Christ himself. He's that life-giving spirit we were talking about earlier. He's the one who replaces our dead, self-made knowledge with his living truth.
So remember that crazy paradox from the very beginning? Why is a person declared clean when the leprosy covers their entire body? Well, here's the answer. It's a symbol. It signifies that moment when we have completely, totally given up on our own living flesh, our own strength, our own reason. When we are fully emptied of ourself, that's when we're finally ready to be made clean and filled with God's Spirit.
So, when you put it all together, this whole complex narrative about leprosy, with all its strange rules and powerful stories, it turns out it was never really about an ancient skin disease at all.
In the end, it's a story about us. It's about the human condition, our deep-seated tendency to trust our own logic over the divine word, and the cure that can only come from total surrender. Which really leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? In your own life, what living flesh, what personal logic or better idea might you need to surrender to find real clarity?